Morrissey, Joel, your experiment this week comes from that shameful decade known as the 80s. It's a film called City Limits, and it stars James Earl Jones at the low point in his career and Kim Cattrall at a high point.
This time, we watch Season 4, Episode 3, City Limits.
The movie that asks, does a post-apocalyptic film really need to be lit?
But first, follow-up.
Yes, we got a letter from Tim over at Fiasco Family Movie Night here at the Megaphonic Network. Tim writes in to say, hey, a little cultural context to make sense of that Devil Doll ad telling people to come in at the beginning. You might remember that they were going to offer you a shock sock.
A sock hop. Yes, I remember the sock hop.
And it's just that you came in the beginning of the movie to get the full effect.
Yes, you won't get maximum shock if you just come at the end to see the spoiler.
Exactly. So, Tim says movie showings starting at a particular time is a relatively recent development. The general practice used to be that the movie would just show several times a day, and people would buy a ticket, come in during the middle if they planned it wrong, sit through the end, and watch the beginning of the next screening in order to catch up.
What? What? That just makes no sense.
Alfred Hitchcock made that part of the ad campaign for Psycho, where moviegoers were told nobody would be admitted late to the film.
Really?
Devil Doll appears to be trying to ride the coattails of that ad campaign 4 years later.
What? That doesn't make any sense to me that you wouldn't arrive at a Okay, but I come from a culture where you show up a little early for the movie so you can watch all the previews for the movies that are coming up. So you don't want to show up in the middle of a movie, so you plan your day around the start of a movie. I just can't imagine there being a continuously running film and you're like, oh, it's 4:30. Let's go down to the theater and just see what's on. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's not like TV where you just turn it on and you're like, oh yeah, it's the middle of a CSI episode, but I've seen this one 10 times, so it's fine. What?
Yeah, I can't help but think, especially now as, the weather gets cold and we wrap ourselves in our warm blankets here, of the 24-hour marathon showings of A Christmas Story.
Oh, yeah, on TNT.
Yeah.
With the lady lamp.
With the lady lamp and the you're going to shoot your eye out and so forth, which my mother would have on in the background, desperate to watch the movie in its entirety at least once over 24 hours and would be unsuccessful about that. But yeah. So, yeah, the idea of these films, I vaguely knew this, but I hadn't really thought about it in a while, I guess. So thank you, Tim, for writing in and reminding us of that. Wow, what a choice to see the end of Devil Doll and decide to stick around for the whole movie.
Seriously, actually. I mean, it's kind of like you see a guy wrestling a doll and you wonder why. I guess you want to fill in those blanks.
I guess. All right. Well, in other news, those of you who've been listening to the show for a while will know that we have a Patreon, which thank you for supporting if you have supported it.
Thank you.
And that Patreon comes with a friendly Slack for fans of our show or any other show on the Megaphonic Network. Well, Slack was the choice of the Megaphonic Network when it launched the Patreon a few years ago. And that seemed reasonable at the time, but it's clear now that this kind of thing belongs on Discord, and that several of our fans only had Slack installed because of this one group. So we've done the right thing, and we've switched over to Discord. If you have been holding off on hanging out with us in Slack because you don't care for Slack, well, it's Discord now. Get in touch with us, check the Patreon, etc., and you'll find out how to join us. Also, in the Discord now, a conversation topic came up when we were wondering about two things that have become very important to It's Just a Show lately. Donald Pleasance, of course.
Of course.
And Angela Lansbury, from Murder, She Wrote.
Yes.
And the question was, were those two ever in a movie together?
Were they?
They were. They were in a movie called The Greatest Story Ever Told.
Oh my gosh. Which is, of course, the Donald Pleasance life story.
Basically, yeah, it's the story of Jesus.
Oh, that guy.
Is one of those 1960s epics where it tells the entire life story of Jesus.
Does Charlton Heston show up as well? Because I understand he's in every
Yes.
epic. Oh, he does. So
Yes,
good.
yes, he's absolutely in it as John the Baptist.
Oh, wonderful.
This movie has everyone in it. It's got Claude Rains as Herod. It's got Pontius Pilate as played by Telly Savalas.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's got Martin Landau as Caiaphas. It's got David McCallum, a.k.a. the guy from The Man from U.N.C.L.E. or Ducky from NCIS.
Oh my God, I love him.
As Judas Iscariot.
No. Does it have any women in it, Chris? I mean, you just named a whole bunch of, fantastic male actors, but who plays Mary?
Dorothy McGuire, who is not quite as famous, but you may know her for being the mom in Swiss Family Robinson.
Oh, of course, yeah. And Mary Magdalene? I mean, come on, there's more than, I guess there's only two. Two women in the story of Jesus.
And Mary Magdalene is played by Joanna Dunham, who you also probably don't know. And of course, it's got a bunch of small roles, including the following people. I'm just going to list them off here. Robert Blake.
Oh, uh-huh.
Pat Boone.
No.
Jamie Farr, a.k.a. Klinger from MASH. Angela Lansbury, the reason we're watching this.
Mm-hmm.
Sal Mineo.
Oh.
Sidney Poitier.
Stop.
Shelley Winters.
Oh,
And John Wayne.
No way. No way, but there aren't any conflicts with indigenous peoples. What is he going? Oh, maybe there is in Jesus' story, actually.
He plays a Roman centurion who watches the crucifixion and says, in the full John Wayne voice, truly this man was the Son of God.
Oh, my gosh.
And, of course, it's got Donald Pleasance as Satan.
Oh.
So we decided that several of us from the network are going to gather together and watch this movie and record a special podcast just for Patreons all about The Greatest Story Ever Told, and it's a wild cast of stars. Charlotte, I know you're super busy, so you probably won't be able to sit down and watch a 3.5-hour long terrible movie just to enjoy the fact that Martin Landau's in it.
We'll see. I think I might try to get that on my schedule, depending on when y'all have decided to make it happen. Because I have to say, my migration over to Discord, I didn't have Discord before this. My kid has Discord. I don't. And so I'm still getting used to the new platform. So I missed this conversation entirely.
Oh, well, we'll have to get you all up on it. And everybody stay tuned to see whether Charlotte is in fact going to be on that special episode.
Will Charlotte be on that special episode? Find out next time on... Okay, yeah.
But I will be, so your fourth favorite host, if it's just a show, will be on it.
I think, Chris, you're my number one.
All right, everybody, let us talk about City Limits.
If we must.
This time we watched Season 4, Episode 3, City Limits. In the not-too-distant future, a mysterious plague kills most of the adults in the world. But it can't kill James Earl Jones, so he takes exactly one of the Earth's 2 billion orphan children into his home and raises them on his farm. And 15 years later, the kid is all grown up and wants to head into the big city in order to join a gang. And so our hero, named Lee, heads to Los Angeles, or what's left of it, to join the Clippers. But on the way over, he gets into a bit of a scrap with LA's other gang, the DAs, and one of the DAs dies. When he finally does reach the Clippers, they aren't really interested in having him join, but it turns out that the Clippers and the DAs have this ongoing truce where they're not going to kill each other, and our hero has accidentally broken that truce by, killing that guy, and, well, things are getting complicated. They're also complicated by the Sunya Corporation, who are trying to take over the city. They promise to provide power and hospitals, which you'd think would be good, but they're doing this by enslaving locals and killing everyone who resists. So, that seems bad. The DAs have been working with Sunya because they figure they're too powerful to fight against, but the Clippers are determined to resist no matter the cost. Oh, and Kim Cattrall works for Sonya, and she thinks the whole killing and slavery thing is a bit much. So when she finds out about it, she decides she's going to help the Clippers. Yay! Anyway, the Clippers seem to be stuck with Lee now, but at least he's pretty good at fighting. But after one scrap too many, Lee leads the gang back to James Earl Jones's farm for a little rest and relaxation. And in that bucolic setting, he and Kim Cattrall fall in love, and the team plan a big assault on Sonya Corp. Finally, everybody gets back on their motorcycles. Gosh, have I mentioned that everybody in this movie rides a motorcycle like all the time? Almost all the adults died, but I guess the ones that survived were working in the petroleum extraction, refinement, and distribution industries because there is no shortage of gasoline in this movie. But anyway, the kids all get on their motorcycles, except for James Earl Jones. He's got some sort of classic car that he's been working on in his garage, and they all drive back to L.A., they attack Sonya Corp, and they win. Why, they even get to kill branch regional manager Robbie Benson by ramming into his desk with a motorcycle. The desk then sort of pins him to the wall behind him and crushes into his stomach, rupturing several internal organs. Anyway, Robbie really milks the death scene for all it's worth. Mwah. After which, the Clippers and the DAs unite, and Kim Cattrall helps them fill out the paperwork to be recognized by the government that only recently had authorized Sonya Corp to kill and enslave them. The end!
Meanwhile, on the Satellite of Love, one of my favorite reoccurring bits on TV's classic You Can't Do That on Television was the river of slime that fell upon an actor when they uttered the phrase, "I don't know." So impressive was this threat that an entire generation was molded, unable to admit their lack of understanding, and you get to teach them how to use their iPhones. Fortunately, that's not the fate of one Joel Robinson when the bots convince him to say ping pong balls, and a downpour of ping pong balls fall from the ceiling, I guess, and they keep falling, and there's more. This results in the bots cackling and Tom Servo's head being full of ping pong balls, and crow's eyes. Oh, you bots. The Mads force our trio to knock off this behavior as it's time for the invention exchange. Do they always theme their inventions? I haven't noticed, but this time they did. Joel and the bots have one-upped Mr. Potato Head and created Mr. Meat and Potato Head, or just Mr. Meathead, with old, gamey beef product. It's pretty foul. As an aside, my grandmother's favorite insulting term of endearment was "you meathead," though she occasionally used "dumb bunny" as well. Anyway, the Mads have decided meat is murder, but preservation is forever, and thus they have Morrissey in a Tupperware container. Is it wrong that Mike is the perfect Morrissey? And did he mention he cries? At the break, Crow sings his ode to Kim Cattrall, which he does a cappella, but not like that a cappella. How come when Crow sings, it's not a musical number, but it is for everyone else? Anywho, the ode transitions into a reenactment of a favorite scene from hit movie Mannequin, where Joel accuses Tom of being one sick puppy, and GPC is the perfect Kim Cattrall. I love that when they dress up GPC, she gets a big set of hot red lips. Next movie break finds Crow and Tom perusing their comic book collection, which inspires Joel to inspire the bots to create a new pantheon of superheroes, the Fantastic 85, including such dynamic superheroes as Lumberman and Always Smells Like Maple Man, Butterman. The cascade of superhero names continues into the next break, but now it's the Fantastic 185, including The Girl Who Smells Like Soda Crackers, Super Fanny Bryce, Dr. Doorknob and His Super Magnetic Thing, Larry King, and Johnny Action Finger. Movie's done, and Tom just can't remember a thing about it, which is unfortunate since they're playing Trivial Pursuit, City Limits Edition. Crow can't remember anything either. Joel pretends he's outraged, but really he's holding the Trivial Pursuit card, so we know he's already seen the answer on the back. And don't pretend like you knew the answer before you read it on the back, Joel. Sorry, that unearthed a little past trauma. Moving on. We have a couple letters, and one includes jokes. None of these cheer up Morrissey, and Frank smothers him. Good times for a change. What do you think, sirs?
It's the 80s, or it's 15 years after the 80s, which I guess makes it the 90s or the 2000 or...
I don't know. It's still emphatically the 80s here, Chris. I mean, who would wear that sheepskin remnant combination coat except for a action hero of the 80s? I guess Barbarella would, but she totally would have toned it down a little bit, right? Just made it a little bikini.
You know, if this movie had been lit properly, it would have been lovely to see all these fashions.
Yeah, you might be exaggerating your the appeal of these fashions here, Chris. It was super. You're right. It was super dark. I don't know. I didn't watch this as part of the Turkey Day Marathon. I watched this over at the Gizmoplex. Did anything improve? Because this was one of the ones that they had the new megapixel one, right?
Yeah. I don't remember it looking that much better. They weren't using a different print. They were using the same print, but they had upscaled it and tried to tweak it a bit. That was sort of what was going on with those remastered versions. So it's not like they went and found the
original film and went frame by frame and improved it for us.
Exactly. That is not my understanding of what that process actually turned out to be.
Fair enough. It's a shame because they have so many riffs about movies from the 50s and the 60s filming a, quote, nighttime scene, but it looks like it's daytime because they've lit it so much. And then we have this movie, which is clearly filming everything in the dark and you can't see a ding-dang thing. And it's like, this is one of those times where I'd rather have the riff about them filming in the middle of the day but pretending it's night, you know?
Yeah, I also managed to get my hands on a copy of an unriffed version of the movie, and it is just as miserable to watch.
Oh.
So, what did you think of this episode and this movie?
It was okay. It wasn't super great. They had some fun riffs. The movie is kind of a weird slog through so much of it, and that's unfortunate, but you're right, like the outfits are really kind of outrageous, and there's some strange motivations for the characters, but I didn't hate it, and I didn't love it. I'm somewhere in the middle. How about you?
I think that's a fair assessment. The movie is not great to look at, and it's confusing as heck to figure out what's going on, and more importantly, why. And, you know, the riffing is good, but it doesn't give it as much zing as you might hope, but it's not an unpleasant time. And there are definitely some charming scenes and moments and riffs and so forth. Like, I'm not unhappy to revisit it, but it's not going to be in my top 10 episodes ever. Absolutely not.
No.
It's no Catalina Caper.
It's no Alien from LA.
No.
Neither the riffing nor the movie is as punchy as the Alien from LA is, which is unfortunate because the movie has kind of the same feel of being like very 80s and very just odd in its presentation of what another world is like.
Yeah. I mean, the episode that it most reminds me of, and we might talk about this in a bit, is Warrior of the Lost World, which is another sort of post-apocalyptic, motorcycle-centric universe. But that one has Donald Pleasance. So
that automatically makes it a fan favorite, right?
Exactly. And it's lit, which makes a huge difference, it turns out.
Who knew?
I don't know. I really got obsessed with how badly lit this was, or how frugally lit this movie was.
Yeah, the only thing with really good lighting was James Earl Jones's farm.
Yeah, exactly. The exterior shots in the desert with all the sun. Yes. There they really managed to Barry Lyndon that up. Were you happy to be watching a movie about how all the adults died during a great plague while we are sort of living through one?
No, but for some reason, while I was watching this, it didn't at all I feel like Tom and Crow, where just everything about the movie just left my brain as soon as I heard it. Because I was reading your notes about the movie and I was just like, oh, is that how all the adults died? I guess they did. It was a plague. It like didn't even register with me when I was like watching the movie why the adults were not around. It was like, oh, okay. But also, everybody looks like an adult. There are no children.
Well, it's 15 years later.
Still, like, there's no children.
Yep.
Like,
it's like a Mountain Goat song. It's true.
but except in the weird flashback that one of the characters has about why they're have a relationship with Mick 15 years later after it happens. I don't know.
Right.
So bizarre. Because honestly, 15 years later, if the only people who live are people who are under the age of 10, say, you now have a whole group of people who are in their young adulthood. Seems like there'd be some kids now.
It's possible. It depends on how old they were at the time. But yeah, no, some of them should be having kids by now, though, you know, we only see the people in the gangs.
I mean, and what constitutes adult?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If you're making a film in 1984, 85 about a great plague wiping out adults, boy, that sounds like AIDS.
Oh my gosh, that didn't even track for me while I was watching it.
No, because the movie doesn't touch that at all, which, fair enough. It's best that it doesn't. But if you think that is the plague in question, then it leads to some interesting consequences. But also, like, I don't know, that may or may not have been what they were thinking of at the time because it was still fairly early in that, and they might have seen that as, I don't know. It may not have been. Like,
I seriously like that. Did the AIDS being the inspiration for the plague or the specific plague in no way, like, hit for me when I was watching this.
I mean, again, there's no details about the plague except that it only kills adults. So it's not especially resonant with AIDS in particular. That just was, you know, getting some headlines. I mean, maybe they were still thinking about Legionnaire's disease.
I mean, it feels almost more like an afterthought that it was a plague that took out the adults. Because I'm sure they were just sitting around saying, we want to have a bunch of 20-year-olds. There can't be anybody older. There can't be anybody younger. What can take out the adults? I don't know. How about a plague? Awesome. Go with it. I don't know. If the plague was actually important, I suppose it would have been more of a plot point for them. Instead, it's all about riding motorcycles and being a part of a gang.
Yeah.
Perhaps they're more inspired by West Side Story.
One of the delights of this episode is that there are a lot of famous people in it. Or rather, it's not like Angel's Revenge, where there's a lot of cameos from, you know, faded stars in it. There's a lot of people who would turn out to be famous or important Hollywood figures. People whose careers lasted and are still ongoing, which is kind of unusual for such a bad movie.
Yeah, well, I mean, is it really all that unusual for such a bad movie? Everybody's got to start somewhere. Look at everybody who Roger Corman pushed forward into the, you know, universe.
Sure. And usually when we have a Roger Corman episode, we do a familiar faces because there's a few, but like, a lot of the people in this movie, even characters that are very bit parts, turn out to have interesting careers afterwards. So let's once again have ourselves a good time with this recurring segment that somehow still does not have a theme song, Familiar Faces.
Woohoo!
And let's begin with the star of this movie, at least in Crow's eyes, Kim Cattrall, as Helen Wickings, which is such a weird name, but whatever.
Yeah, agreed.
You know that she is CanCon.
Yes. I do, in fact, know that.
I mean, she wasn't born in Canada, but she lived here when she was a kid, and she is on Canada's Walk of Fame right here in Toronto. So
Aww.
That counts.
Well, if Canada accepts her, then it absolutely must count.
Also, I mean, importantly, for a while, she dated Pierre Trudeau.
Is that related to the former prime minister, current prime minister?
That is the current prime minister's dad, who was the prime minister in the 70s, yes.
Oh, well, good for you, Kim Cattrall. Look at that. Crossing boundaries from Hollywood into politics. What a wonderful thing.
I think it was before she was in Hollywood, and I don't think dating Pierre Trudeau is a particularly rare feather in one's cap if you're of a certain age.
Well, I haven't dated him, so,
Yeah, well,
but then I'm not
thankfully.
Canadian, so there you go.
Exactly. But nevertheless, let's see some career highlights. I mean, she's had a big career, but she had a few roles in TV and film, like in Porky's and the original Police Academy and City Limits, until she got her big break in the little underground film called Mannequin, which I think we'll talk about in a second, but let me just finish this up. She also notably played Lieutenant Valeris in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country in 1991, and then became reasonably well known for playing Samantha in Sex and the City.
Yeah, I suppose she's known for that.
In addition to that, she's spent the last 10 years or so, I mean, still working, but doing quite a lot of theater work.
All of those ones, like when I think of Kim Cattrall's career, besides her fantastic turn in Mannequin, I think of her in Police Academy, and I think of her in Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes.
Those are the ones that flag for me for Kim Cattrall.
Did you never watch Sex and the City?
Oh, of course I watched Sex and the City, but that's different, right? Like, I don't think of those as being her early work. It seems to me, just in terms of thinking about her career, there seems to be a gap in between these movies that I associate with her in the 80s, and then when she takes a turn on Sex and the City, which she absolutely, is fantastic inside of that show. It's hysterical. I mean, not a fantastic show, Sex and the City, it's okay, but she's amazing in it.
Have you seen Mannequin?
Mannequin. I have seen Mannequin. I've seen Mannequin a lot. I feel like Mannequin was on a lot on TV when I was a kid, and it would be one of the things that we would turn on, like Beastmaster and Mannequin. Those are the two movies you get to see all the time. That and Short Circuit. So, I have seen Mannequin. It's such a fun movie.
See, I also feel like Mannequin was on all the time, but then I realized that I'm thinking of Today's Special.
What is Today's Special?
Today's Special is a Canadian children's TV show that was on Nickelodeon in the 80s, which is where I watched it, which was set in a department store, and there was a mannequin who came to life.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't go back and watch Mannequin because it's not available on any of the streaming services that I have, but I seem to recall that she was the reincarnation of the spirit of an Egyptian princess. And there was something she had to perform within a time period in order to become, a real person instead of just being a doll. It's a remake of Pinocchio, it could just stand up there with Guillermo del Toro's recent turn in Pinocchio. And no, Mannequin is so much more fun than that, I'm sure. I don't know. I haven't seen the Guillermo del Toro.
I have not seen either. I've somehow still managed to not properly watch Mannequin, despite everything.
What? It's got Andrew McCarthy in it. As a hapless ne'er-do-well who starts dressing mannequins, and then Kim Cattrall comes to life and teaches him how to laugh at love again.
Why did you lead with Andrew McCarthy when Estelle Getty is sitting right there being much more tempting?
Because I don't remember Estelle Getty being in it, because she's not the love interest, and because when I watched it, I was a child in the 80s, and it was all about Andrew McCarthy and Kim Cattrall and their fun sidekick gay black friend. Because you had to have one of those, right?
Yes, played by Meshach Taylor, of course, from Designing Women.
And he's amazing in it. So good.
Estelle Getty plays the store owner.
Oh.
And is billed third, as far as I could tell.
Oh my gosh. Is she the one that finds Andrew McCarthy in a bed on the main floor as the department store is opening up, in bed with a mannequin? Because, of course, she can't be alive in front of anybody except for him.
Probably, yeah. Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie.
I mean, that would be the judgiest set of eyes. Estelle Getty does that so well.
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm looking over the plot summary, and yes, Estelle Getty has security video of
nice.
That would include him being romantic with the mannequin. But she's cool with that because she nasty. Estelle Getty is nasty. So the other story about Kim Cattrall that I want to say is that I've heard that Kim Cattrall found out about this episode of MST3K when she was in a hotel room and flipping channels and stumbled upon a little yellow robot with a weird beak for a mouth singing this song of devotion to her.
That would be amazing timing. That would be the most, I don't know, apocryphal story. I'm just what timing, what fantastic, coinciding of events.
If that's the story, I also can imagine her flipping it over and seeing, oh God, that film I was in, let me watch a few minutes of it. And then they cut to the segment part.
Mhm.
I don't know whether that's actually true. I couldn't confirm that. But what is true is that having heard about this and having seen the clip, she arranged for flowers to be sent to Crow in their studio in Minnesota. And has said as recently as 2020 that she still has a crush on that robot.
Well, who doesn't?
And it is wild to occasionally see her and Trace flirting on Twitter. In a very platonic, like, haha, we're having fun. She was also very happy to be a guest at the Convention Con Expo Festorama 2 in 1996.
Oh, that's excellent.
And she introduced a performance of The Mads Are Back. They're, Frank and Trace's lovely show in 2018, one of the live shows. So she was willing to do that. So, she stays in touch, which is wonderful.
It really is, actually.
Hello?
Hey, Charlotte, it's Chris.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. I'm just editing the episode, and I realized I forgot to talk to you about the most important thing about Kim Cattrall.
I can't imagine that there's something more important about Kim Cattrall than her not-so-secret love of Crow T. Robot. What could possibly be more important?
Kim Cattrall exists in the universe of MST3K, and not just as, that person that Crow idolizes. Kim Cattrall is Kinga's mother.
No way!
This is what Dr. Earhart tells us in one of the season 12 episodes, yeah.
Huh. And isn't Kinga Dr. Forrester's daughter?
Yep.
And that makes Kim Cattrall the, partner of Dr. Forrester?
Well, I mean, they had a fling at the very least.
Well, they had a fling, and, Kim Cattrall birthed Kinga and then gave Kinga to Dr. Forrester to raise to become an evil mad scientist?
To be fair, I think she must have been a bit of a handful as a child. Who wouldn't want to give her away?
Perhaps Kim Cattrall just needed, the space to pursue her many-faceted career.
No, it's been a glorious career, and the fact that she took 9 months out of it to give birth to a mad scientist is, for most people, it's just one other thing on her CV, but for us Misties, it is a big deal.
It is a big deal. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm flabbergasted. I just didn't realize that, of course, that Kim Cattrall was Kinga's mom.
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, I couldn't let the episode go out without telling you because I knew we'd get letters, and I also had to make sure that you knew. So
I'm so glad you said something, because, how could I have missed such an important fact?
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Another big name in this one is James Earl Jones.
It's true.
Playing Albert, the adoptive father of our hero, I guess.
Question mark, yeah.
James Earl Jones, he's got a long career.
Sure, he's done a few things. Mostly in this episode. Joel and the bots are really into the fact that he was the guy who said, "This is CNN," as the CNN true.
bumper, which, to be fair, in the early 90s, even if you didn't watch the news, you somehow heard that a lot.
And how much can you start talking about Star Wars, right? That just seems to dominate the James Earl Jones career for so many people. It's nice that they referenced anything else, right?
I don't think they mentioned Darth Vader at all.
I don't think so.
Which seems strange.
They don't even mention that he was in Beastmaster as the, snake god guy.
I was going to say,
Worshipper.
Yeah. He was in a bunch of other films. He was in Conan the Barbarian. He was in The Lion King. He was in this one. But you seem really dead set on him being in Beastmaster.
You know what it is? It's because I conflate Beastmaster and the original Conan the Barbarian into one film in my mind. So that I start out with Conan and then I end with James Earl Jones, because those are the best parts of both of those movies. I mean, start out with Beastmaster and then go into James Earl Jones from Conan the Barbarian.
Right, because he's not in Beastmaster.
But he should be. I mean, it's the same sort of thing. Like, there's a weird man / god worshiper person, and the ferrets have to take him down, and it's James Earl Jones who turns into a snake, and then Arnold Schwarzenegger is wrestling him, and then the guy from Beastmaster shows up again, and he's just really high. They're the same movie for me. I think someday there's just going to be a cut between the two where it's just like best plot points of both because they're so similar. So I would never do that with the second Conan movie because Grace Jones is in it. So
Would you do it with the second Beastmaster movie, which has Robert Zadar in it?
So I have never seen the second Beastmaster movie. That sounds like an abomination. Come on.
You skipped right ahead to Beastmaster 3, The Eye of Braxis.
Well, I mean, who wouldn't? No! There's only one Beastmaster, and in it, Arnold Schwarzenegger wrestles with James Earl Jones, and there's ferrets, obviously. Oh, and they're a really big jaguar, too.
All right. Well, much like this episode, we have decided to ignore most of James Earl Jones's career to talk about something that he's not even in.
Oh, it's so funny. Poor James Earl Jones, because he really does have an amazing career. He really does.
Anywho, moving on. Rae Dawn Chong is here as Yogi.
So you really need to tell me who this person is because Joel and the bot seem to know her and respond every time she's on screen, and I didn't recognize her at all. What would I know her from?
You would know her from, well, she was in a bunch of not great movies. She was in The Color Purple. She was in, which I'm not saying anything about that being a good or not good movie. I haven't seen it. She was in Commando.
I have seen it. It's phenomenal. I don't remember her in it, though.
I don't think it was a big role.
Okay.
She was in Commando.
Wait, she was in Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Yeah.
Who wrestles James Earl Jones, the snake?
It all comes back to Beastmaster.
It all comes back to Beastmaster. Sorry. Anyway, I'm sure Rae Dawn Chong has a fantastic career all of her own without having to reference these other people. So what else? She was in Commando. She was in The Color Purple. What else might I know her from?
Well, more importantly, Rae Dawn Chong is the daughter of Tommy Chong, as in Cheech and Chong.
Oh, huh.
So that's another reason why you might know her or have heard of her, or why there's a couple of references to Tommy Chong type things over the course of the episode. And like Tommy Chong, she is CanCon.
Oh, well, look at that.
They were both born in Edmonton.
Nice.
One other little detail about Rae Dawn Chong I thought I'd drop. Rae Dawn Chong was the person who discovered, in the Hollywood sense, Chris Pratt.
No way.
Chris Pratt was waiting tables at a Bubba Gump's shrimp company in Hawaii or something, and she cast him in the film that she was directing, which is called Cursed Part 3. He's gone on to do better.
Yes, and worse, I think. But such is the life of an actor.
Let's see who else is in this film. John Stockwell plays Lee, our main character, the farm boy turned gangster biker guy, whatever.
Yeah. I don't recognize his name at all. Is he related to Dean Stockwell, though? Because Dean Stockwell, I think, is amazing.
I don't believe he's related to Dean Stockwell. He is the uncle of a musician named Florence Welsh of Florence and the Machine, which some of our listeners might well care about. You might know about him from his appearance in a film called Top Gun.
Who is he in Top Gun?
He's Cougar. He's Maverick's original partner in the beginning of the movie.
Oh, man. That's a tough lot to draw right there. I mean...
Sure. The other interesting thing about John Stockwell that I wanted to mention was that he began his career as a model.
Ooh, oh la la.
And as a young model, he became friends with Andy Warhol.
Oh, well, how lucky for him, maybe.
So there's a photo of John Stockwell, Calvin Klein, Andy Warhol, and Tom Styron. I'm not really sure who he is, at a party for Elton John in 1980, which you can purchase from Getty Images for several $100s if you really want to.
Wow!
But look at him there.
He's so young.
Well, yeah.
Somehow, Every time I see a picture of Andy Warhol, I'm like, that's not Andy Warhol. Because in my mind, he's always David Bowie in an Andy Warhol wig from the time that David Bowie played Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
That's on me. That's on me.
Speaking of David Bowie, there's another photo of him with Bianca Jagger.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Wasn't there a riff inside of the episode about something being the proof that Jagger and Bowie had a relationship?
Yes, there was a riff about that.
Well, there you go. Look at how connected everything is.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to point out about John Stockwell, he had a bit of an acting career, and then he went mostly behind the scenes, and he wrote a few movies, including the semi-biographical movie Breast Man from 1997, starring David Schwimmer as one of the people behind the invention of the breast implant.
You are joking.
No. Also appearing in this film, because the hits keep coming, Robbie Benson as Carver, the big baddie, the regional branch manager who gets delightfully killed by the end of it.
I mean, he's a big baddie like, Michael from The Office is a big bad. I mean...
He has almost no screen time and does almost no acting. Mm-hmm. And yet, he's this looming presence staring at his 80s phone.
His 80s phone.
Which they refer to as a cheese phone at one point, because it looks like little squares of cheese where all the buttons are. And I spent the rest of the time with landlines and offices thinking of all those phones as cheese phones. And it made me happy every day I worked. Every day I had to work in an office in the 90s.
At least you got something out of this City Limits episode.
What do you know about Robbie Benson?
I know nothing about Robbie Benson, other than he's handsome.
Yes. Well, he was in a bunch of teen coming-of-age films in the 70s that did okay. He tested for a role of a character named Luke Skywalker, but that ultimately went to someone else.
Yeah.
And they make fun of his career here, which was in a pretty poor state when the movie was made, but wasn't in such a poor state when the episode came out.
Oh.
Because, as devoted listener Luke pointed out in our Slack, Robbie Benson had just gotten a big role by the time this episode came out. It was a few years before. So they should have known about the fact that he had a major role as the voice of Beast in Beauty and the Beast.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Which I hadn't quite realized because I have not actually seen Beauty and the Beast.
Are you serious? The Disney movie Beauty and the Beast.
Oh, yeah, the one that everyone has seen. I'm the one. We need to have one person who hasn't seen every piece of media, and usually it is me. But
oh my gosh. But I mean, okay, I guess as a girl, right? Like Belle was one of the first heroines that wasn't just doing nothing, but she actually, quote, read books, which made her, different than the other girls. And it has the Gaston song. Chris, come on. Haven't I sung the Gaston song to you 100 million times? Oh my gosh.
You showed me the live action version of it.
Well, Luke Evans is the most amazing Gaston ever. And I adore the live action one. And I hope that someday they build Gaston's Tavern in a Walt Disney theme park somewhere so that I could go to Gaston's Tavern and see the painting of Luke Evans triumphant as Gaston. I look forward to that in my life. Hey, did Robbie Benson do the singing when he was in the movie, or did somebody else sing the songs for him?
Yes, Robbie Benson does sing on something there. And apparently, Paige O'Hara, who plays Belle, had to convince Ashman and Menken to let Benson record the song, even those few lines. So there's your answer. There is not a lot of singing for Beast in the movie because Robbie Benson is not a trained singer, but he does get a few lines. So good for him.
Yeah.
Okay. There's just a few more, and they're pretty quick.
Okay. Okay.
These are less recognizable faces, I'll admit. Dean Devlin plays Ernie.
Not Bert.
Not Bert. Ernie's the baby-faced one of the group, you might remember.
Oh, uh-huh.
He appeared in a bunch of movies in the 80s, usually because he was so baby-faced playing teenagers, even when he was in his 20s. Just sort of what he's doing here, I guess. His acting career didn't go so well, but he did start taking on work behind the scenes in writing and producing movies. And he worked with a guy named Roland Emmerich.
Who I'm thinking... why does Emmerich sound like a Blade Runner name?
Well, not Blade Runner, but together they did make Stargate
Wow.
Independence Day,
Stop.
the 98 Godzilla movie,
The one with Matthew Broderick?
the one with Matthew Broderick, indeed. Yeah, he's the guy who wrote that, or co-wrote it with Roland. He's the guy who, with Roland Emmerich, co-wrote Independence Day. That little baby-faced Ernie character.
I mean, it's fun writing. There's no question.
Yeah, no, people love that movie.
And he got to make, Brent Spiner Data say, as you might imagine, they don't let us get out much. I mean, it's a great line for him.
Another similar small detail, Tony Plana plays Ramos, who is another one of them, another one of the gang. I don't even remember which one it is. But he's had a pretty good career. He's continued working, and he would eventually star as the dad on the TV show Ugly Betty.
Oh, nice. That's a fun show.
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen it, but I'm glad to hear that. Mm-hmm. And I think for a particular segment of our audience, he might be best known for providing the voice of the hero Manny from the beloved 1998 LucasArts game Grim Fandango, which is on several people's lists as one of the best video games ever made.
So that means I've never played it. Have you?
I have only played a hot second or two of it. I was never into the 90s point and click type games, and they're really slow paced to play them now, I find, but I do want to give this another try at some point. It's a really visually striking game, even if it is like LucasArts like 3D game, and therefore it's Polygon City, but it's still pretty impressive. It still has an aesthetic, let's say.
Sure. I would live in Polygon City. That sounds like a fun place.
And that is the list of familiar faces. There are more people even that we could talk about, but I think we've done enough.
Haven't we, though?
I think we need to move on to the Shallow 13.
Hey, everybody, it's time for the Shallow 13.
It's time for the Shallow 13. 13 speedy little details about today's experiment, City Limits. Go, Charlotte, go!
We've got nothing else interesting to say about the making of the film, so let's go straight to the references. At the start of the episode, when the Mads call, Joel says,
"Quiet, you guys. Sonny, Terry, and Brownie McGee are calling."
Brownie McGee played guitar, and Sonny Terry played harmonica, and together they sang the blues within the 60s folk revival movement. We'll put a link to a concert in the show notes. Check them out.
During the invention exchange, Mike Nelson makes an appearance as the singer Morrissey, who, like Nelson, has grown up to embrace some far-right views that might make fans of his early work uncomfortable. Nevertheless, it's a great performance, and includes an actual Morrissey line. "Is it wrong not to always be glad?" is an actual line from the Smiths song, "Sheila Take a Bow."
Early on in the movie, a shot rings out, and Crow says,
"Oh, Austin City Limits."
Austin City Limits is a live music TV show that has been airing on PBS since 1974. And yes, it's still running today, and not in repeats like The Lawrence Welk Show. The first guest was Willie Nelson. The most recent episode at time of recording features Texas artists Leon Bridges and Krungbin. Oh, and the other part of the joke is that Texas has a lot of guns. In fact, it's the state with the most guns, over 1 million registered firearms as of 2021.
As Lee pulls the wounded leader of the Clippers off his motorcycle, Tom says,
"Oh, it's the Doc Severinsen gang."
And yeah, in the right light, or lack of light, the Clippers guy does look a bit like Doc Severinsen. Severinsen, of course, was the trumpeter who led Johnny Carson's band on The Tonight Show. In fact, he'd been working in the band since the very first episode of The Tonight Show with Steve Allen. He is the model for every talk show band leader who's a little bit wacky. And he's still alive and kicking at time of recording, aged 95.
As the camera lingers a little too long on a desolate road curving up between two mountains, Crow says,
Hey, it's becoming a Windham Hill album cover.
We mentioned Windham Hill in our episode on Pod People, but as a reminder, they were a Bay Area record label that published an eclectic variety of music, mostly instrumental and very, very mellow, but not smooth. The album covers, designed by Anne Robinson, tended to be a landscape photograph on a white background.
At one point during the opening credits, a harmonica wails, and Tom riffs.
Oh, I get it. Soundtrack by Jerry Rafferty.
Jerry Rafferty was in the band Steelers Wheel, who sang Stuck in the Middle with You. But he's best known for his solo song, Baker Street, aka that song with the most iconic saxophone solo ever. I'm not entirely sure what this riff is on about, because Rafferty isn't really associated with harmonicas, but I guess if you sort of squint your ears, that wail sounds a bit like the atmospheric opening to Baker Street. Maybe? I don't know. Link in the show notes if you want to compare them.
We get a close-up on the baby-faced Ernie as Tom says,
Oh, that's Michelle Shock.
Michelle Shock's career as a singer-songwriter had some success in the late 80s and early 90s, but like Morrissey, she has perhaps not aged well. She has become born again and gotten into a kerfuffle a few years ago with some homophobic remarks that rankled much of her original fan base. Bleh.
The leader of the rival gang, the DAs, is telling a Sunya employee about what's going on, and we get this.
We're having a game. Husker Du in Norwegian means, do you remember?
Husker Du was a seminal alternative rock band from Minneapolis, but that's not what this riff is about, or not quite. The band took its name from a 70s board game, a simple match the hidden images game for kids, and that's what Joel's referring to.
The DAs are about to fight the Clippers, and they're wearing some ridiculous outfits, so Tom says,
Hey, Paul Revere and the Raiders.
Paul Revere and the Raiders were a 60s band who dressed up in costumes vaguely reminiscent of the American Revolution. Their biggest hit came in 1971 after they'd given up the costumes with the highly problematic Indian reservation, The Lament of the Cherokee Reservation Indian.
You might know that song. The chorus is, Cherokee people, Cherokee tribe, so proud to live, so proud to die. The song is filled with stereotypes about Native Americans, including terms and details that have nothing to do with Cherokees. And the song suggests that the Cherokee Nation have died out, which would probably come as a big shock to the over 400,000 Cherokee people living today.
A little later, the leader of the Clippers says,
Lady, nobody gives nothing for nothing.
Except Billy Preston.
Mm-hmm.
Billy Preston was a keyboard player and a well-respected session musician. Famously, he's the only person to get a featuring credit on a Beatles song, on the single for Get Back and Don't Let Me Down. But he had a few hits of his own, and Tom is referencing the delightful Nothing from Nothing. Link in the show notes if you don't know it.
As James Earl Jones launches his part of the attack on Sunya, he whistles a familiar tune.
Hey, he's whistling the Roger Ramjet song.
Roger Ramjet, he's a man, hero of our nation.
Okay, the familiar tune is Yankee Doodle Dandy, but maybe you're also old enough to remember it as the theme song to 60s animated cartoon Roger Ramjet.
Roger Ramjet was a patriotic pilot who, like the pilots in the Starfighters, was proud about his use of pep pills to keep him focused on the job. In his case, the pep pills stood for proton energy pills, which would, quote, give him the strength of 20 atom bombs for 20 seconds, end quote. Sounds like fun, right, kids?
And that's time.
Chris, I think we've explored this post-apocalyptical world full of familiar faces and not so familiar faces for long enough, but perhaps you have a final factoid for us?
I do, or I have a moment in the episode that I want to bring up and talk about for a bit. So before we get into this, I want to apologize because this is going to involve dead naming someone, which is not a good thing to do generally. But, you know, given the circumstances, it's unavoidable. And the person in question is a famous person and everybody knows their pre-transition name. So there's a joke about, as Joel says, Bruce Jenner. And the shot that you see where this joke happens, he's wearing like a weird kind of piece of armor, like looking thing.
And it's a big guy, like a really beefy, muscular, like side character inside of the film.
Yes. And I think they immediately make a joke about he's wearing a boob plate. Because there's these giant, like, breast shapes on the armor thing.
Like a Picasso boob plate or something.
Exactly. And if you see that now, you think, ooh, is that a transphobic joke? Because, of course, Caitlyn Jenner has transitioned, and the show has occasionally dabbled in transphobia and so forth.
It has, indeed.
And then you might remember or look up that Caitlyn Jenner didn't come out and transition publicly until 2015.
Wow.
So that's not what the joke is.
Not at all.
There was no sense of Caitlyn Jenner at the time being less than manly, so to speak, in quotation marks.
Mm-hmm.
No, the joke is that the actor who's wearing the boob plate just kind of looks like what Caitlyn Jenner looked like back then.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of boring haircut from the early 80s that my brother had, and, things like that. It has nothing to do with the boob plate. It's a weird coincidence is what it is. But it's so hard not to read it that way when you see it now until you remember the history. At least I found it like, it took me back for a second, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. Would she have even been out yet? Well, there have been rumors even then or anything like that. No, nothing at all. That's not the joke. That just happens to be going on, and it looks like it's the joke. Which is, I think, really interesting.
If you've been affected by the issues on this show, if you were adopted by James Earl Jones, or if you'd like to ask us anything, get in touch with us. Our website is itsjustashow.com, and we're on Twitter for now at itisjustashow. We'd love to hear from you. This show is made possible by listeners like you, and like our randomly selected supporter, James. Thank you, James. For as little as $1 an episode, you can be like James and help us research and record this show. You can join us in a friendly Discord where we all hang out and live stream our reactions to new episodes. And you can listen to all our superfan bonus bits. Find out more at itsjustashow.com/Patreon or patreon.com/itsjustashow. And if you want to follow up on anything that was mentioned today, you'll find links in our show notes at itsjustashow.com/episode/123. Wow, Chris, we have said a lot about the apocalypse, but the world continues on. What are we going to be watching next?
Well, next we're going to hunker down for a bit of holiday joy by watching one of the wintry movies. We are going to be looking at Season 5, Episode 5, The Magic Voyage of Sinbad.
Ooh. All of my favorite Sinbad movies have skeletons fighting. This isn't that one, though, huh?
Well, I don't want to spoil the surprise, but probably not. But we'll find out soon enough. And until then...
Until next time, call 1-900-TALK to Robbie. This is Robbie Benson. What are you wearing?
Did I mention that I cried? Take it away, Theme Squad. There's a million things I want you to know. I could talk off your ear for a year or so, but time is running short. We've all got to go. So sit back, relax, it's just a show. Sit back, relax, it's just a show. Sit back, relax, it's just a show. It's just a show.
And did he mention he cries?